Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We're going into a new chapter in the Pure Worship book. We want to just recap very briefly the main point of the last chapter, just to make sure we don't miss it. And it's by such unsystematic methods, the composition of this book, for instance, that they get certain ideas in your head that are very hard to dislodge.
Well, the one they want to strongly get is pure worship. Pure worship.
Obviously, that's the theme of the whole book. So I'm going to be reading from the screen as we move into the next chapter, but I want to just read you one verse that kind of caps the message of the last chapter, because they're setting us up for something in the next chapter, which is unclean worship and what that looks like. So I'm going to be reading from the screen, Vivian, from the book. Hang in there. Here we go. This is page 159 under the heading Jehovah's Blessings on Pure Worship. They say in paragraph 24, Jehovah comes to that visionary temple. Notice it's not the spiritual temple, it's the visionary temple now. And he promises his people that he will remain there for as long as they adhere faithfully to his standards for pure worship.
And then they reference Ezekiel 43. But the whole point of them going to the temple is because they are impure. That's why they have to go there and offer sacrifice, because they're sinners.
So the temple, as long as it stands, and the sacrificial system, as long as it endures, is a day-by-day reminder that you are impure, not pure worshipers, and that therefore God is a faithful God, even if you are unfaithful. That's the whole message of the law of Moses.
And they've totally missed it.
All right, now we move to the next chapter, which some very elaborate pictures here, which I'm not quite sure what we're looking at.
This is the picture. I don't know if you can see that, but
I guess it's angel wings.
Yeah.
What we're saying here on a 2-page spread. And there's a lot of this imagery in their modern literature and in their videos, I notice nowadays. It used to be, well, just less dependent on imagery.
Yeah, they are
in the old days than they are now. Yeah, this chapter, I will zealously defend my holy name, and the subhead is Pure Worship Survives Attack. And you notice immediately that we're in Ezekiel 39 now. We've moved back 4 chapters.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? And then you notice on the next page, now we're back to Ezekiel 16. Why are they jumping around?
Yeah, they don't do things in sequence, and there is a reason. Because if you did it in sequence, you wouldn't be able to make the claims they make. So the prophets have a sequence that they present, which indicates that there's going to be, the people will remain impure, basically, until he comes.
Until he comes. Now that's the united testimony of all the prophets, and sequentially, Ezekiel is actually the best, because he does do things in sequence, whereas a lot of prophets do not.
Yeah.
Look at this paragraph, though, that's on page 161 under this huge picture. The last sentence of it especially. Why will Jehovah, a God of love, execute the many millions of wicked people? Well, there's at least 2 things wrong with that sentence, that question.
Yeah, they think more than millions are going to be destroyed, because they think they're the only ones that are going to remain standing.
So really the number should be 7 billion plus. And why are these ones going to be executed by a God of love? They say it's because they are wicked people.
But what makes them wicked? They're not associated with Jehovah's Witnesses.
They're not associated with God's only organization, the pure worshipers, the true religion, etc., etc. As long as you have those 2 ideas, pure worship and true religion, in place, there's not much you can do with a Jehovah's Witness mindset.
Yeah.
Even after they leave, they're still stuck in that mindset of, we have to find a true religion now, or the true religion. And some just give up the quest because they realize it's it's impossible. I will bring an end to your prostitution is the full title of chapter 15. And they're basing it on Ezekiel 16:41. Of course, those familiar texts about the harlot, the little girl that God raises and who turns into a harlot. And then the later chapter 23. They'll get to why they're using 16 and 23 here. You might notice if you go to paragraph, what is it, paragraph 3 here, the only references they have from the Bible are Ezekiel 16 and 23 in those two paragraphs. Why is that? Because they want to fix the idea that in Israel's case, at least, the harlotry is not just social, it's deliberate. So let's read paragraphs 2 and 3 and see how they put it.
Picture a woman who deliberately chooses such a life of prostitution. She sees it not as degrading, but as empowering. She is eager for the money and influence that this profession offers. Worse yet, what if this woman had a good, loyal husband, but she willingly betrayed him in order to pursue prostitution? It would be difficult to feel anything but revulsion for such a woman and the course of life that she has chosen. The strong reaction that we feel is a key reason why Jehovah God repeatedly uses the description of prostitution to show how he feels about false religion. And 3 as well? The book of Ezekiel contains 2 remarkable passages in which prostitution illustrates the terrible unfaithfulness of God's people in Israel and Judah. And that's where they reference chapter 16 and 23. Before we take a closer look at those passages, though, we do well to take note of another symbolic prostitute. Her form of prostitution appears long before Ezekiel's day, even before Israel existed, and is still thriving today. This prostitute is identified in the last book of the Bible, Revelation.
All right, they're already setting up the game. And the game is us against everybody else. Everybody else is false religion but us. So why did they make the link to Revelation right away? Why are we jumping from Ezekiel, where the prostitutes are Judah and Israel, the split kingdom, which is healed by God even by the time the book of Ezekiel is being written? God has fixed this problem with his prostitute wife, hasn't he? And that's all missing from here, because you want to jump to Revelation where you find a new prostitute, not Israel anymore, but what you call the world empire false religion, which, by the way, Russell didn't believe in. He didn't believe it was a world empire false religion. It was Christendom, specifically the Catholic Church, but also unfaithful Protestantism and Orthodoxy. But it wasn't this. So in your haste to get to the problem, which you think is wicked people in all the religions of the world, so 7.5 billion people, almost all of whom are religious, really. I would have to estimate more than 90% of them are religious in some form, but part of what you call false religion. And out of that, of course, some 2.5 billion, 1/3, are Christendom. You're in your haste to brand everybody who disagrees with the Watchtower as false religion. Well, you do this. You just skip right through the text, missing entirely that this is not the whole picture of God's relationship with his ancient people.
So I think it's interesting that they say, they make this comparison of a woman with a faithful husband, and then they use the word revulsion. We would feel revulsion for such a woman who engages in prostitution and is unfaithful to her husband. And so they're equating that with how God feels. And yet that is denied in Scripture. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't like that she's unfaithful, but he doesn't push her away because of it.
And
not in the sense that he wants to destroy them like the Watchtower would have. Well, that woman is worthy of destruction. Read the whole book of Hosea, and that gives you a picture of the kind of God is. He's not one that, because of your unfaithfulness and impurity, which is bound to be because we're all sinners, he loves this woman. Even though she's unfaithful, he puts her to a distance, he disciplines her, but he protects her and he provides for her. Preserves her.
Although she doesn't...
In the end, she will come back to him.
Read all of Hosea, but especially the command at the beginning. Take for yourself a wife of prostitution, a wife who is a harlot.
Yeah.
That's a command. That's not what the average man would do, is it?
No.
But God does it. God does it with this. But by the way, there's a bigger problem in even the way you set this up, though. At the end of paragraph 2, you say, God repeatedly uses the description of a prostitute to show how he feels about false religion.
But he's not talking about false religion. He's talking about his own people, his covenant people.
People.
His wife.
People who he likens to his wife. Yeah. This is not about religion. Israel is not a religion. It has a great variety of it has a mixed religious heritage by the time the exile comes, and that's what the exile cures, by the way. This syncretistic habit they have of collecting the best of all the religions around them and combining it with the worship of Yahweh. The religious aspect of it is very pronounced, of course, in the Old Testament, because God's relationship with them, though, is not determined by their religion, because the initiation of the relationship back in the days of Abraham was when they were still worshiping gods, carrying gods with them from their prior life.
Yeah.
Across the river, as Joshua puts it, or across the flood, right?
And then when he saves them out of Egypt, they're also worshiping false gods in Egypt, which you just don't get that picture when you're thinking as a witness. You think they're rescued because they're the good ones.
And if you doubt that, read Ezekiel chapter 20. We've already done a video or two on that, but also read the last chapter of Joshua, where Joshua makes the case it's not because of any merit in you that you have this relationship with the true God. It's not about your truth and faithfulness. It's about his.
Yeah.
And that's missing here. This is not about how he feels about false religion. We know how he feels about falsehood in general. And that's why the fact that you're making this case is so, what can we say? Yeah. I think of our departure from the Watchtower some 36 years ago, and we realize that we're the ones who are always calling out Christendom. We're the ones who are blackening everybody in Christendom and calling them wicked and deserving of Armageddon, and near death, because we think of them as somehow false and ourselves as true.
That's
but
right.
What a farce that was.
We think we can deserve it, that we can make ourselves pure and deserve salvation.
Yeah.
Rescuing. But that's contrary to all the people in the scriptures. You find they're flawed people, sinners. Jacob is still before he finally gets to Bethel, he's still putting away false gods. I mean, they were consistently unfaithful in that sense.
And if you just read chapters 23 and 16 again in the book that they're citing here, the illustrations of the two prostitutes, north and south, the end of the story is not what you want it to be. The prostitute gets cleaned up.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, the story of Hosea and Isaiah and all the other prophets, that one day God will deal with his people in a way that permanently fixes their waywardness.
It takes an act on God's part to clean us. Any of us. Israel and us. Gentiles.
So what are our links?
Okay. We're linking to a video called Babylon Destroyed in the Spring of 1918. Survivors to Come to the Works of Pastor Russell for Light. So we didn't mention this, but really their whole teaching here is based on a false prophecy they made at the beginning of their history.
Yeah.
Russell said Babylon the Great would be destroyed in 1918.
And before that, he'd said it would be in the 1870s and early 80s that Babylon fell. It would be completely destroyed by 1914 and then 1918 in the finished mystery. So all of this is built on the rubble of a bunch of false prophecies.
Yeah, they just hang on to what they want to hang on to and kind of build on it.
And to show you the unity of God and his revelation, we're also linking a playlist, right?
Yeah, Safer's book that we went through, the divine unity of Scripture.
And Safer, by the way, was a contemporary of both Russell and Rutherford. Now, his insights into how God knew all this in advance. This is not a surprise to God that his people would prove to be unfaithful to him.
Because he's a converted Jew.
And Sappho was a converted Jew, so he knows how it feels to be on the other side of the argument, namely that you're surviving people, a preserved people, as the Jews are to this day. Yeah. You're a preserved people, but you're still not in an intimate relationship with God. That is yet future. Yeah. That's all obscured from our vision here. None of this can happen. There can be no pure worship on earth until Yahweh himself arrives.
And changes people's hearts.
Yeah. See you next time.